Robert Robertson from Ad Hoc Studios' Dispatch, a smart, quick-thinking man who crafted an impressive hero career as Mecha Man. However, when Robert hit rock bottom, thanks to Blonde Blazer's eye for talent, he found out, as we all did, that he also had a knack for hero dispatching. And fortunately for him, he's going to need it, as today we're going to find out how he'd get along in the role of a hero dispatcher if we were to imagine his circumstances in the world of One Punch Man, where he'll have to manage eccentric heroes and monstrous threats. Today's video is going to focus on which heroes he'd have the most interesting interactions with and what he'd likely identify as their strengths if we use the Dispatch game's simple but effective system. For purposes of simplicity, we'll ignore how different cities in One Punch Man have different dispatchers, or operators as they're called in One Punch Man, so that we can explore a wider variety of interactions between the heroes scattered across the various locations. And for familiarity with Dispatch, we'll go under the idea that dispatcher to hero interactions function the same way as it does in the game. The same way I'm expecting you to already have a general understanding of both series if you're watching this video. And what better way to kick off the video than with King? While Robert would be thinking the world's strongest man is ready to be deployed when needed, the reality of it is that King would be finding any means necessary to get out of missions while completely stonewalling Robert in conversations that could threaten to uncover the truth. And each time any ounce of suspicion came up from Robert's end as he sat in that dispatcher's chair, King would pull off a fraud masterclass by sheer coincidence to erase those doubts once more. Do you remember how in Dispatch, sometimes a member of the Z team would unchoose themselves from a mission if they weren't feeling it? That'd be happening with Robert and King. Except King, with that deep voice of his, would inform Robert that he's already in a life or death battle with enemies at every turn, when really he's just in the middle of playing a video game. Robert would no doubt get frustrated, but what can you do when the best hero alive is already up to his neck in monster attacks? Or so he says. Another great turnout would be Robert contacting King and giving him the mission details, and if King has no out, his device would show him moving toward the threat Robert set for him. Then, suddenly, King's icon starts going in the wrong direction. King, you're off route. Where are you going? I need to go get something first. Are you serious? Mumen Rider is literally trying to fend off a dinosaur right now. This is an emergency. If I don't pick this up, it'll be on my mind. Then I won't be able to operate at 100% of power. No! What's actually happening is that King ran out of excuses for a change, and so he's went to grab Saitama for help. And when King finally arrives and Saitama one-punches the monster into oblivion, it looks as if King has pulled off another massive job with success. Robert would definitely not be thrilled with how hard it is to get King on a job, but when he finally does, somehow even the most dangerous threats are dealt with instantly. If King were in the game of Dispatch, his physical stats would be totally maxed out across the board, except most of the time, you just can't choose him, and if you do, he unchooses himself. But on a rare occasion that it does work, you instantly ace any dispatch no matter how hard it is, because, well, he managed to bring Saitama with him. This next one is interesting because it explores something we've not actually seen Robert's thoughts on, and it involves Child Emperor. Yes, despite being physically gifted in battle and possessing a brilliant mind for strategy and science, he is still a 10-year-old. We know Robert is open to making heroes of unlikely people, a testament to himself becoming one while he has no powers, and reforming criminals as heroes via his leadership of the Z team. But Dispatch does not explore whether or not Robert thinks children can become heroes on the front lines too. And that's no fault of Dispatch, of course, since it's not exactly an expected plot point from the audience to know how Robert feels about sending kids to fight gangbangers, mass murderers, and mutant freaks. And yet, this is what he faces with Child Emperor as an option on call. I'd like to think that Robert would make a point of not sending Child Emperor into any situations that he didn't think he could handle, or at least keep him away from ones which held some level of risk to an S-class hero. After all, Robert is a professional who should be clever enough to not undermine his own work while also ensuring Child Emperor doesn't feel left out or belittled. The young lad definitely does not like being taken unseriously due to his age, and if he feels Robert is purposefully not sending him anywhere, well, it wouldn't make his job any easier. I do think their conversations would be fruitful though. Robert's used to being a man in a mech, and he's talking to a boy genius who not only builds tons of gadgets and weapons, but his own mech too. Robert may ask Child Emperor for some advice or his thoughts on certain tech or equipment during the downtime in their calls, and I'd expect Child Emperor would play ball when conversing about mechs and other robotic weapons. In fact, I bet Child Emperor would find Robert's situation pretty interesting. Huh? You use a mech but can't fix it yourself? That's so weird. Perhaps if they get friendly enough, Child Emperor may just build that astral pulse for Robert himself. Naturally, Child Emperor's best stat would be intellect, so he's your man. Or boy. For those brain-teasing missions. Brain power isn't Metalbat's forte though, however he's got enough power in that swing of his to get a lot of work done. I don't think Robert and Metalbat will have a lot to say to one another at first, as Robert would pitch him the jobs and Metalbat would make home runs out of them in what's a fairly straightforward working relationship, but once Robert brought up his pet dog over the communicator during conversation, it'd prompt Metalbat to bring up his pet cat, and since the two of these incorruptible guys are animal lovers, I'm sure they'd be trading stories about their beloved pets until it's time for Metalbat to go and hammer some monster to death. Whatever initial iciness Robert would probably feel over the call during the start of their experience together, their talks would hold some warmth after Metalbat figures out Robert's a good guy, since he always has respect for stand-up, genuine people. Thinking about Metalbat in Dispatch's stat system, I'll go with combat being what Robert recognizes is highest, since hitting things hard is his main deal, and not many do it better. Now, we know Robert is something of an unassuming ladies' man, but he's not going to be able to smooth his way through this one. Tatsumaki isn't easy for anyone to handle, and if Robert's not careful, he'll be getting a high-pitched audio storm through his earpiece if he wastes Tatsumaki's time. For Robert, it will be assuring to know that he has a hero on call who, for what it's worth, should be expected to win just about any confrontation she's sent to and without much difficulty whatsoever. Although his patience is going to be tested when Tatsumaki starts screaming back at him through the comms for giving her work that's too easy, or not giving her enough work, or not thanking her enough for doing her job so well that it allows some insignificant nobody like him to keep his own job by association. What you need to understand is Robert is probably going to break a personal record of sighing during dispatch once he starts working with Tatsumaki. And if Robert tries to get too smart with her, well, she's only going to get louder. I can picture Robert sitting there while he's getting an earful, putting his hands over his face, then clicking the mute button to just let Tatsumaki wail into the void until she's eventually asking if Robert can still hear her and if he's still there. Robert would also know not to dispatch Tatsumaki to any jobs which require high charisma, because even though many of us love Tatsumaki, we also know her communication skills would probably be -1. However, she'd be full points for compatibility without a doubt. Every dispatcher loves a hard worker, and Robert's no different, but I don't think he's ever seen someone work as hard as Genos would be willing to. Robert and Genos aren't going to have any buddy-buddy type relationships, especially since Genos is far too busy being Saitama's disciple to chat it up with some Hero Association dispatcher. However, Robert will need to be more observant than usual when it comes to sending Genos around. We know from experience in One Punch Man that unless Genos is literally taken out to the point of being unable to move, he will continue to fight monsters and advance towards situations where he feels he is needed. Picture Robert having just sent Genos to take out a dangerous monster, then noticing from the nearby drone that Genos is missing an arm with smoke coming from his dented chest plate. Demon Cyborg? Are you broke again? Come back to base. No, I'm not sending you on the next mission with one arm. Yes, Saitama Sensei, whoever that is, will have to wait. So while Genos is always going to be up for whatever's happening, which Robert will appreciate, he'll also know that Genos is probably too eager for his own good and needs to know when to pump the brakes. And like Genos once said himself, what he seeks is ultimate destructive power, so if he were in Dispatch the game, his highest stat would be combat. Starting to sense a pattern here. Moving on, we got Mumen Rider. Yeah, you know he had to be here. Something about Mumen Rider and Robert would remind me a little bit of Waterboy, not in the sense that Mumen Rider is an anxiety-riddled klutz, but just more that he feels so out of place against the magnificently capable heroes of S-Class. Mumen Rider knows his role in the hero rankings and he's never been shy about it, but when talking with Robert, Instead of being compared to those above him or being told that he's just a C-class hero and that he should stay in his lane, no, Roberts would be the guy to tell him that he's just as important as anyone else in this job, and all the people he's helped as the Cyclist for Justice would vouch for that. Roberts would recognize how much of a true hero Mumen Rider is and how he's always offering support in situations not only at his level but also above it in any way he can. Reliable, genuine, brave, he might be C-class, but he'd be one of Roberts' favourite guys, and unlike most of the S-class who he'd probably never get much face time with due to their eccentric personalities or activities, he might actually hit the showers and engage in some locker room talk with Mumen Rider, or end up eating food with him somewhere after a shift before they go their separate ways for the evening. Bringing the game element into this, Mumen Rider's best stat would have to be mobility. The bike says it all, baby. Meanwhile, whenever Robert has Puri Puriiiiiii on call, he'll have to remind the criminal hero that no, he's not into phone sex. And no, he doesn't want to try it with Puri Puriiiiiii. Even though Prisoner would likely make remarks that Roberts has an awfully appealing voice for an operator, and that maybe he should come down to the association headquarters to see if they have even more chemistry in person, Roberts savvy enough to talk his way out of something like that happening. And whenever Roberts in the middle of dispatching and Puri Puriiiiii's icon suddenly appears on the map out of nowhere, he'll have to contact him and say, "Prisoner, noticing you're not in prison. Again. We talked about this. You can't just bust out to do hero work without permission. There's a process to this. Yes, I accept your apology. No, I won't go to dinner with you." Get out! When it comes to dispatch stats, Prisoner's best attribute would be vigor. This guy knows how to take damage, especially later on in the series, and his strength is astounding. Alright, before we get into an overview on how Roberts would do generally as a dispatcher in One Punch Man, let's just quickly fire through some other interactions quickly. There's a lot of heroes, so I don't want to go too deep with them all or we'd be here for ages, so I'll rattle off a few more in simpler terms. Roberts and Zombie Man would be cool. They'd just be shooting the shit casually without much excitement from either side, but they'd know the other is good at their job. Zombie Man's best attribute would be intellect, since he's something of an investigator with good deduction and thinking skills. Vigor works too, but in his case it just means he's a really good punching bag as opposed to being really physically strong, so I favour intellect more. Darkshine would actually remind me of Royd a bit for Robert, just without the science skills. Darkshine is easy to get on with, does what he's told and shows enthusiasm for doing it, so Robert wouldn't really have to work hard to get him firing on dispatch calls, and if Darkshine ever started to get down in the dumps, literal motivational speaker Robert would stir him right up back to where he needs to be. Vigor would be his best stat in dispatch for obvious reasons. He's impenetrable and has lifting strength which can no longer be quantified by numbers, apparently. We know Robert's a dog person too, but even that's not going to get him much luck with Watchdog Man. Fits in Q City, Robert's got the best boy he could ever hope for, but he's fighting an uphill battle whenever he tries to get Watchdog Man to dispatch out of Q City. No amount of dog treat promises, whistles, or good boys is going to make Watchdog Man leave his territory, so sorry Robert, anything outside of Q City and you're going to have to get someone else. Combat is the highest stat for Watchdog Man because, as we know, any monster within his vicinity dies immediately. These are all the ones I feel are worth covering concerning Robert specifically, and all the ones I had energy for. Writing long video scripts sometimes catches up with you guys, but I'd love to hear any specific thoughts you have for others I didn't include in the comments. So, overall, would Robert be a good dispatcher in the world of One Punch Man? What we learned from Dispatch is that Robert is a specialist when it comes to excelling in high-stress environments where quick thinking and perceptive choices need to be made. He's proven he can choose the right people for the right jobs, from helping kids get things out of trees to fighting off city-threatening kaijus. What's more is that Robert's got a proven track record of acing dispatches under even more challenging conditions than any other dispatcher in his verse. His own team are comprised of former villains who are still rough around the edges. They've gotten in each other's way during calls, they've refused his orders and created new problems. Sometimes they didn't even show up. Despite all of this, he kept the city safe each and every time with logical decisions, a composed approach, and an eye to detail. Robert doesn't get weighed down by the occasion, even when portions of the city are blacking out or being assaulted by criminal forces. The S-Class heroes can be uncooperative and hard to work with at times, but Robert's no stranger to that, and he knows how to handle people who don't like to be handled, and not only that, but get the best out of them too. It's likely that not only would Roberts be a good dispatcher in One Punch Man, but he'd be the best dispatcher in the entire Hero Association. Someone who expertly identifies the issues at hand using his own experiences as a hero, technical expertise, and resource management. Roberts would handle both big and small situations just fine, managing heroes from S-Class all the way to C-Class, and knowing who is needed where and for what, or even how to make the most of bad situations by allocating weaker heroes in certain situations which would make their strengths shine. And this overall competency would not only help in dispatching, but threat level classification too, which is another side of One Punch Man's operations. What's clear is that if Robert can spin around a bunch of unreliable misfits into the heroes who stopped Shroud and the Red Ring, then he'd be the best dispatcher the world of One Punch Man has ever seen, and one who'd gain the trust of many heroes. A dispatcher who they'd be happy to have looking out for them. Like, comment, and subscribe for more One Punch Man videos, and let me know what you thought of the thumbnail.